All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Duende Discussions episode 4. I think it's 4.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's my lucky number.
It is?
That's my number. That's my numerology number.
I thought it was 17.
Well, that's my favorite number.
Oh,
But like
okay.
when you break down the birthday dates and the year and the numbers and
Oh,
everything,
okay. Because we
I'm a fan.
share 17. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Our special guest is Sabina Zúñiga Varela. Hi, Sabina.
Hello, hello.
So
Thanks for
Sabina
having me on.
is my beloved desert rose, my creative soulmate. What else are you? Fellow Corker, have roots in
Hmm.
Cork, Ireland.
Yep.
Fellow moon lover. You're an
Yes.
award-winning actress, director, and I just learned award-winning theater director or theater educator at USC.
Oh, yes. I just got a really sweet inaugural recognition that the School of Dramatic Arts just introduced this semester.
I love it. That's so appropriate. Of course, you're such a magical theater educator. We learned so much from you. Um, Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. I love your
Welcome.
New Mexico colors. Turquoise.
Yes, yes. Turquoise, all the colors, all the patterns. Yes.
Your
Love
what are
it.
those called? Gem colors? No.
Jewel
Gem
tones.
Jewel tones. Jewel
Jewel
tones.
tones. Yes.
Yes, you're a jewel tone lady, right?
Absolutely.
The peacock
Absolutely.
feathers. Love
Got the
it.
peacock. This is the Peacock Room by Whistler, the artist Whistler. The
Oh,
whole room was built like over in Europe somewhere, but it was bought and it's at the Smithsonian National Museum of Asian Art. They brought the whole room over and it
oh my
displays
God.
the ceramics collection, but it has all
Wait,
these
I thought you were
gilded
in like
peacocks.
a cute library at USC.
Mm-mm. This is my virtual background.
Oh, okay.
But
I'll
the
I'll
story of this room had a bunch of duendes, so I was like, I'm gonna put this up, and it goes really well with yours.
It does. Library kind of vibes.
Yes.
Though it looks like he's going to crush my head. Dan Stevens. We'll talk about who he's playing later.
Yes. Yes.
Later. But welcome to Duende Discussions episode 4. I'm so excited to, of course, I when I first started the idea for the podcast, I was like, oh my God, I cannot wait for Sabina to be on it. Because we know each other. How long has it been? 2008?
16 years.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
16 years this fall. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
So you were a grade below me at USC in the
Yes.
MFA program. You were an
Mm-hmm.
acting major
Yep.
and I was a writing major. And then we knew each other. Like we were in the same circles just because the MFA
We
group
were
was
really
pretty intimate.
close. At that time, the MFA playwriting and the acting were pretty close because we had those 48-hour festivals, the drama
Right.
club. So we
Right.
got
Drama
really,
club.
we had Golden Gopher and the Far Bar.
Oh
We
my
had our
God.
third
Far
places where
bar.
we'd all hang out. So
So
yeah, we
many
got pretty
shenanigans at
close.
Far Bar. Yeah.
Lots, lots.
But then we really connected and first got kind of our creative juices connected and flowing through. My MFA thesis play was a sequel to Lorca's The House of Bernarda Alba,
Yes.
and you were part of that cast.
Yeah, that was a
Okay.
beautiful happenstance where one of our MFA, she was a third year at the time, Carolyn Zeller,
Yeah.
was in the piece and she booked a national commercial.
Yeah.
And so at the last minute, I got a call from, I believe it was Luis Alfaro called
Luis.
me and said,
Yeah.
hey, we got this thing going on. It was my first professional paid acting gig in LA, was in your MFA thesis project with basically the entire cast of Lydia.
I know.
Um,
It's so,
it was, and Al Espinosa was in it, and Leandro Cano, these people that I went on to work with many, many years later. And it was just
Onawa,
Onawa, Juliet Carrillo,
Zila.
Catalina, Sila, who's now, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a beautiful origin story of,
I just
yeah,
all these incredible, brilliant genius artists in that reading is so memorable and so, oh my God. I love that that was, and you were so great as Martirio.
oh, I
Oh my
love it.
God.
Martirio's my favorite. She's my Richard the Third of Lorca.
Richard, oh, because of the humpback.
Yeah, that's what I always kind of nicknamed her because she has this just like disdain and anger, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like, and she's got the thing going on, and there's just a lot of angst.
Do you think Lorca read Shakespeare?
Absolutely.
And
I
that
would hope
he,
so.
yeah, and that he, I know, I just thought of that after I said it. Of course he did. But like, I wonder if he like was like connecting Richard III to Martirio's being a humpback.
I don't know. That's a good question. And, you know, a lot of people have their theories on whether that's really what was up with Richard. They've decided
Mm.
to, just like with Cyrano, they've decided to take the exceptionality of physicality and change it into something
Blow
different,
it up. Yeah.
blow it up, deconstruct it, totally get rid of it, and make it something more existential. So, but who knows? I think that's kind of fun. That's
There's
what
this
I've
great
always, yeah.
movie. There's this great movie starring, I always forget her last name. Oh, Sally Hawkins. Is that her name?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
About a true story about a woman in
When they
England.
uncovered him in the parking lot. That one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Have you,
watched that on a plane.
oh my God, isn't it
It's
great?
so good.
It's so good.
Not Finding Richard. That's the Al Pacino one.
Yeah, it's something like that. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
incredible. It was so great. It was like a
mm,
thriller kind of, like a
yeah,
mystery. And then I love how they incorporated her illness to his and her like drive to uncover the truth about his illness and
yeah,
how that the idea of disability and talking about the truth of disability. It's such a good movie. I'll try to remember it
yeah.
later.
I forget the name, but I was very fascinated and super into it. I really,
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
it was fantastic. All
Yes.
right. So, Duende discussions for people who are just listening for the first time because you want to start an episode 4 or because you're listening just for Sabina. This podcast explores Spanish playwright Federico Garcia Lorca's idea and concept of duende. And so, duende is in a lot of various cultures, mostly Latin American, some Scandinavian, but all over the world folklore. A duende is kind of like a goblin or an elf or a trickster. They can be mischievous, but they can also be menacing, scary in a way. But
Mhm.
there's also this art concept of duende that Lorca was obsessed with. And I'm obsessed with. You know how obsessed I am with it. Of course, I'm doing a whole podcast about it. But there's various definitions of what it is. And my general definition is that it's the raw kind of vibration of creativity, like a force, a surge of creativity that happens when your soul makes impact with its most authentic self. And it's
Mm,
supposed to be about spirit, authenticity, truth, creativity, inspiration. It's mostly found in flamenco, the Spanish traditional dance of flamenco. That's generally where it is. And Lorca did a whole lecture about it. He's famously very obsessed with it. He talked about it a lot. And so I'm interested in how the idea of something so visceral and so almost supernatural
mm,
in terms of the creative process, what role that has today for artists today, because it's so inspiring for me. And I love talking about it and hearing different definitions and different where it lands for people, other various artists today. Because I don't feel like a lot of people don't really know about it. And so that's why I wanted to do it. And of course, I thought about you so much when I
mhm.
first started the podcast because we have
Yeah.
a theater company together. And even
Yes.
the name of our theater company is part of
It,
a line from,
yeah.
I believe Lorca was quoting somebody else. Our
Yeah, I
company's
have it
called
right
By the Soles of Our
here.
Feet. You have it?
So Lorca said, I heard an old maestro of the guitar say, the duende is not in the throat. The duende surges up inside from the soles of the feet. And so
Ah,
we took that and worked it into the name of our theater company by the soles, SOULS, of our feet. So
yeah.
we based our company on this kind of beautiful passed down. I love that it's an old maestro of guitar,
Hmm.
that Lorca borrowed it from that to show the generational kind of passing down of knowledge and information of these kind of
Hmm.
things. So, yeah.
Awesome. And I love that that's a part of our company too.
Mm-hmm.
Just our mission and our drive. Whenever we're writing grants, I always try to incorporate Duende
Oh,
a
yeah.
little bit
Oh, yeah.
into our into
Mm-hmm.
our mission and aesthetic. So awesome. So I want to know, I feel like we've talked about this so much, but I've never really gotten like sat down and said, Sabina, what is your exact definition? Not exact, doesn't have to be exact, but like
Sure.
specifically, like how would you define duende for yourself or just in general or
I think I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been such a fan of the show and I've had such a great time listening to it.
Oh.
You've really curated an amazing way to kind of go about this concept, this idea, this also literal, figurative little trickster presence in so many cultures. And at this point right now, because I think things shift and change,
Mm.
and after having a conversation with our fellow theater company member Nathan saying last night, I've come to the belief that for me, Duende is a moment when the past, present, and future all come together. And I
Mm.
also do feel that it's a vibration. It's something felt in the bones, almost in the
Mhm.
marrow of the bones.
Ooh.
So, as Lorca says, there's muses and there's angels, but those are external kind of influences and forces. But the duende is something very personal and internal. And it's this like synchronicity where time doesn't mean what we think it means.
Mhm.
Time becomes something beyond, before, and at that moment at the same time. And so I just think it's this, in our MFA training, I'll never get Andy Robinson's voice out of my head saying moment to moment, moment to moment, just
Mhm.
really trying to be in that beginner's mind, in that space of just like anything can happen, something must happen, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, there's an interesting, maybe a physics or something happening with time when duende happens. It either stops or it accelerates or it's gone back or it's all happening, everything everywhere all at once.
I was just gonna say that. Everything
Yes.
everywhere all at once.
Yes, pretty much.
And it's, oh, I love that. Yes, I've never thought about time in Duende before. Thank you for that revelation. I love that idea of everything of it being a surge that's almost mentally or intellectually you can't comprehend. It's something that is
Right.
felt.
That
And
can't be
so,
defined, right? Yeah.
right. And it's the viscera. Like I love the word visceral. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
overuse it sometimes, but I love the word visceral because it means of like the flesh, like your organs, like
Yes.
viscera, like something that you feel, your
Yes.
guts. And Lorca Lorca was so much about that. It was about the earth and the landscape and the
Mm-hmm.
power of the landscape. It's like when you read his poetry and hear his plays performed or watch his plays performed, you can almost taste the dirt and the smell the heat and it's so sensorial
Mm-hmm.
and it's so much about the idea of humanity being a part of the earth like another overused word organic literally organic.
Yeah.
Oh, I
Well,
love that.
the matter, like what we're made up of, we can literally be turned into diamonds
Mm.
because of the carbon and because of everything we have inside of us. Humans are made up of stuff that you can, if you have enough money, you can pay to get your remains turned into the strongest material on Earth that is made, in the earth because of pressure and compression and all that. But they have this technology now where they are turning humans into diamonds as a sign of respect for their remains afterwards,
Wow.
which just shows we are fucking stardust.
I was gonna say, like, can we turn ourselves into diamonds? Like literal
I
diamonds
think
just by
so. I
like
mean,
when we're alive, can we do
the
it? I
pressure,
wonder.
who knows? Maybe that's those moments of
Shapeshifter.
glinty, the glinty, beautiful moments of creation where we feel almost invincible. Maybe we do become diamonds in those moments of duende. Duende diamonds.
Duende diamonds!
Duende
Hashtag, I
diamonds.
love alliteration. Oh my God. Diamonds with the Z.
Diamonds with a Z.
Diamonds
Let's
with
do
the
it.
Z.
I
Oh,
love
I
it. We need
love that.
necklaces.
Because Duende is so, I love that idea because Duende is so almost bloody, but it also has
Yeah.
this blessed aspect. I mean, I know
Hmm.
Lorca said kick the muse to the curb or reject the angel or whatever, but I think it does have this kind of shiny aspect it's like not to get like too gory, but sometimes blood can have like a shine to it.
Oh yeah,
And
it's beautiful.
and I love that. I love that duality. So much about Duende's duality, right? And
There's a lot of, I would say more, rather than duality, I would say more dynamic,
mm,
where it's kind of the same, but instead
oh
of it's
yeah.
either or, it's more of spectrumy, where it's like I don't know, it kind of flows. You were just reminding me, for the first time a couple years ago, I helped quarter an elk with my cousin and my
Whoa.
partner went hunting in the northern New Mexico and got an elk, and I was a little nervous about how I would be. I don't quite have vasovagal syndrome, but
What's
when
that?
somebody, so that's when you see somebody's blood or a wound and you pass out
Oh.
because you just completely, you just like, you feel it so heavily that you pass out.
Hmm.
Um, I learned that in an audition for a Grey's Anatomy scene. I had to say it over and over and over again, so I knew how to say it. Vasovagal, vasovagal. But I have it slightly to where if somebody has a scar or they just cut their finger and they're showing it to me, I'll get a little flip in my stomach of just
Yeah.
like, oh, like the ET, like, ouch, where he just like really feels. So I was a little nervous. How am I going to do with seeing the
Yeah.
entrails? And it was more beautiful than gross. The
Hmm.
color of the blood coming out of the heart was very different than the color of the blood coming out of the muscles, which was
Hmm.
very different than the blood in the intestines, which was still turquoise because it hadn't been exposed to oxygen yet.
Their
Because
blood is
our
turquoise?
blood is turquoise. Our blood is blue.
Oh,
Our blood is
right.
blue. It's not until it hits oxygen that it turns red. And so just to see a whole sack of intestines with these beautiful, it was just gorgeous.
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
was stunned by the beauty of the death of this animal.
I'm brewing a turquoise elk poem right now. I
Beautiful.
love that.
I
That's
love it.
so, yeah, I love that idea of it being of the death being, oh God, now I'm going off the rail about
Well, I think it's similar to what Lorca says of
death
like
and
how
being
he,
beautiful. Hmm.
well, how Lorca feels that Spain holds this almost this, not an ownership of Duende, but a real special relationship with it because death in Spain is revered in a different way than maybe, you
Yes.
know. And I think a lot of indigenous Latin American cultures, like we have a certain relationship with death that there are these moments of duende and in ritual, I
Hmm.
think, that are just very much a part of who we are.
Well, that was something I love that you bring that up because he said that quote that I put at the beginning of my Bernardo Alba sequel, something where he said the dead in Spain are the most alive in any
Mm-hmm,
country in the world.
mm-hmm,
And I remember researching it because I dramaturged Bernardo Alba in Chicago before I wrote the sequel as a writer. And I remember in my research that it was seen there women in Spain at that time in the 19 because the plays like turn of the 1900s, like early 1900s, the funeral was actually more important than their wedding
mm,
because it was their transition into the real life, at least for the Catholics.
yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
transition into the actual goal was to be with Jesus in heaven and God.
Yeah.
And so the funeral processions are like the biggest day of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're
Mm-hmm.
still considered lives, their legacy, their existence. But yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how death in America is so taboo to even talk about, or when in a lot of other places it's seen as something that's part of everyday life or something that
Well,
is
I was just listening
ritualistic.
to
And
an Irish comedian and she was, oh no, she was Scottish. Sorry. She was a Scottish one, but she was also saying how the Irish do it as well. And she's like,
yeah.
you wouldn't know if it was somebody's birthday or a funeral or a wedding. Just like it's such a beautiful, the energy that you put towards just it's a celebration
Hmm.
of a transition
Yeah.
rather than an
Did I
end to
did I
something.
send it to you? There was a reel on Instagram that I saw. There's a museum in Ireland that's a wake museum.
Oh, I love
It's
it.
a museum, you go in and it's an immersive experience of an Irish wake.
No, we got to
Yeah,
go.
we
We got to
have to
put that
go.
on our list.
We have to go. I love that kind of connection between Spain and Ireland and that, well, just in a lot of cultures actually, besides America, is this kind
Ireland
of,
was connected to a lot of indigenous groups. They gave them so much support during some really
mhm,
hard times. Mexico, they fought in the Mexican American War.
right.
Like Ireland, Irish are freaking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. Oh, also I loved the idea of when Lorca said something else that he said about Duende is that the Duende won't appear unless there's the possibility of death.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that like that the pit that you're constantly like the Duende is most fervent at the edge, like at the pit,
Mm-hmm.
the edge of the pit. So it's like
Yeah.
this liminal, this like highly charged liminal place
Yes.
where your soul and mostly active in live performances or live art
Yes.
events. And I love that. To me, that's that image between the audience and the artist,
Hmm.
that space, and it becomes blended. And yeah. And for you, well, I'll get to that later. So where have you ever experienced duende in your own creative process or in like a specific performance? I have my own ideas of what I want to talk about for you, but I want to know what
It's
for you
fascinating
like.
because I was listening to most recently the podcast you had with Ali.
Mm.
And when the conversation came up about panic attacks and panic disorder,
Mm,
it really got me thinking of a particular moment in my life where it was during a little bit before grad school, and during grad school, I was having quite a relationship with panic attacks, which
mm.
was unusual. And I did a one night performance of Paula Sismar's Seven,
Right.
our own MFA writing professor, Paula Sismar, with this incredible group of actors. It was a one night event for Visions and Voices on the beautiful Bovard stage at USC, 90 minutes. I was playing Farida Azizi, Afghani woman, and throughout the whole process was feeling a lot of just like, this doesn't feel right. I don't think I should be representing this story. But because of how I look, it was just like, no, it's great. Learn the dialect. It's fine. It's that kind of
Mm-hmm.
old school versus new school of who gets to
Right.
play what.
Mm-hmm.
So the night of the show, I had a panic attack for the entire performance,
Wow.
the entire 90 minutes. However, I still said all my lines, did all my blocking. Nobody had any idea. End of the show, went into the dressing room, just fell into tears. That's how my
Yeah.
panic attacks end. It's that release, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it got me to thinking about, as performers, the ability we have to live in a couple different places at the same time when we're on stage.
Mm-hmm.
There are moments where you get so absorbed into it, you really are truly in the moment, but that's so it's not a permanent. It's very impermanent to be in that space, I think. And there's moments where you're fully charged and engaged, but you can still see the person sleeping in the front row, or the person who just got up to go to the bathroom, or notice that your castmate just dropped a piece of paper and you're trying to figure out how many lines can I use to get that piece of paper off the floor, but you're still in the moment. So it's again
Mm-hmm.
that time warp
Yeah.
of present and future planning and
Multitasking.
multitasking as you're on stage, still delivering a performance. I don't know that I would call that duende, but I would call it something akin to a muscle that we form
Mm-hmm.
as performers that kind of keep us, there's some sort of channel that's still open
Mm-hmm.
that we're still connected to. Um, and I may be just going a little bit too far off about that, but just these
Oh.
interesting, I think I'm sticking to more of the visceralness of kind of what goes on inside the body when being on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been times where certain emotion comes up, overcomes me. I would say, in particular, in Luis Alfaro's work, I've had moments where I I don't even know what came out of me, but there was something very connected to the earth and like ancestors and story that came out, the ending of Mojada with the sound of that bird, the the violence as Jocasta in Oedipus, um, and the just the rage of Electricidad. All of those pieces, I think, I feel have probably been the space where I've had the most access to really um, get close to maybe understanding my duende.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is it? Does it look like anything? Does your duende in those moments of rage or vulnerability, desperation, extreme power, as these incredible Luis Alfaro Greek adaptation characters, does your duende look like anything, or does it feel, what's the
It's a
sensory experience
sensation. It's
sensation?
yeah, I think again going back to visceral, and this just reminded me of a moment in grad school working with the great Natsuko Ohama. I was working with my classmate. We were doing the scene of Hamlet and Ophelia. And it's when Hamlet shuns her, right? Rips up her love letters, get thee to a nunnery.
Mhm.
And as he leaves, she says, oh, to have seen what I have seen. And she starts to crack. These are the seeds of when she ends up in the flower laced
Mhm.
pond later.
Mhm.
She literally starts to lose it within those words. And as the exercise, my scene partner and I were sitting, our knees were touching, and we were just gazing into each other's eyes while our professor was feeding us the lines that we would just repeat over and over. And something happened to my eyes. They shifted. So I don't know if it was like a dilation, like you see when cats
Yeah.
turn into the predator, right? You get to see their eyes just go fully dilated, or the effect that drugs have on the system. Thinking of that beautiful scene in Requiem for a Dream where they show everybody's eyes dilating when
Mm.
they're on their respective drug journeys. My eyes shifted and I went crazy.
Wow.
And it wasn't me, but it was totally me.
Mhm.
And it was something that it was in a room, it wasn't a performance, it was just a rehearsal. But I will never forget feeling the shift of my eyes move. So it was really, really visceral within the
You were
eyes.
becoming the alley cat that you channeled as
Yes,
Jamie
I
later.
think so.
Is
It
everything
was just,
pink? Yeah.
it's this feeling of having, what people love to say, irrational and, you know, moments of violence, of crimes of passion. But there is, as going back to the lecture again, there's nothing like rational about Duende.
Hmm.
Or no, it's what Ali was saying. I think it was like there's no
Yeah.
rationality to it. There's no like boundaries. It
Boundaries.
just
Yeah.
it just overtakes you.
Was that a Meisner exercise?
It's what we would call dropping in.
Oh, okay.
It was part of learning the text by heart, where you would say one line over and over and over, and as you said it, the professor, the facilitator, would ask questions, personal questions, and you would answer her questions by speaking that line. And it would
Oh,
shift the way that line would come out every single time. And then all of a sudden it just got woven into the fabric of
that's
your
so cool.
cellular mass so that you just couldn't help but know that text by heart.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool. There's so many possibility within the limitation
Yes. I love
of
that.
that.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Well, that was what I was going to say. And I have a few specific questions about so your performance as Medea
Mm-hmm.
in Luis Alfaro's adaptation of the ancient Greek play. He specifically adapted the Euripides version, right? I
Yes.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've seen and experienced the Sabina Duende in performance many times, but I have to say, I think the one that really unsettled me was, in a good way,
Mm-hmm.
was at the Magic when it was, I believe the version of it was Bruja.
Mm-hmm.
And so people don't know the play. It's how would you describe the basic general of Luis's?
Well, the great thing about describing Bruja is it was almost a straight adaptation of the classic.
Hmm.
Like it didn't have the immigrant story that the later Mojada versions had.
Hmm.
The men were men. The
Hmm.
neighbor, Aegeus, was a man. The king, Creon, was a man. There were two
Hmm.
twins, which is what's in the original myth. And it really was a story of darkness
Hmm.
and this power that this woman had inside of her as a sorceress, which in the original Medea was a sorcerer. She had a way with herbs,
Hmm.
and her grandfather was Helios, the sun.
Hmm.
So she had some god support there, and there was an image I remember in that piece where with the projector they projected this dark pulsing heart
Yeah.
onto my chest as I was starting to conjure
Just
the
got
the
chills. Yeah.
energy needed to follow through with what I was going to do. And I
Yeah.
chased those freaking kids around that stage. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't just like I felt so I mean those
I'm getting like teary thinking about it
it
because
was intense.
it was so intense. And I remember sitting in the theater and during that moment, it was like I did feel the presence of Duende. Like I
Mm,
definitely felt the presence of duende. And then on the verge, like I was talking about with Ali
mm,
at in Joshua Tree, when one of the only times I ever felt the presence of demons was
mm.
at the
Oh yeah, when
Integratron
you had your
after
edible.
taking the edible,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I incorporated into Serpentine Pink. But
Yes.
and there it was like on the verge of feeling that kind of thing because it
Mm,
was a darkness that I'd never felt before and that I'd never felt from a play before and
mm.
from you either, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember when the curtain came down or the lights came up, I remember being like shaking and being like, I need to get out of here. This is
Hmm.
something has been conjured in this space. I need to go like sage my entire body.
Yeah.
I need to like exit. But it was so thrilling at the same time
Yeah.
because it was like that's exactly what this woman had to channel and go through in order to do the act that she had to that she felt she had to do. The
Well, and
sacrifice, you know, and
there's a
so
sacrifice, and I think there's also a connection to all the women that came before her that have
right.
had to deal with this freaking crap,
Hmm.
and so sometimes I wonder if, we think about the people that really conjure up what they need to go up against military opposition and
Mm.
to help incite regime changes and toppling, dictators, how much of that visceral power, that action
Hmm.
is conjured because of somebody's ancestors are kind of pushing them towards it.
Hmm.
And then it just can't help but like it just has to happen. Been pushed
Yeah.
far enough, that
And so
genetic
that
memory.
we can feel that resonance, the ancestral resonance, and I definitely felt it there in
Yeah.
order for us to remember, like you said, like what happens when people in these positions have to go to the lengths they have to go to in order to
Mm-hmm.
survive, in order to protect, in order to thrive, even.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, the question I had for you was, how careful do you have, talking about boundaries, how careful do you have, are you consciously careful about how much duende you channel with a character like Medea when she's a sorceress? And so it's a very tricky thing when you're because the ritual of theater is like a reenactment, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also a literal ritual happening.
Yeah.
So, and you are so genuine in your performances. You go like 1,000%. You're this incredibly visceral performer. And is there anything, do you have to protect yourself in when you're playing a character like a sorceress who, like, they used to call Medea a witch,
Yeah.
that you have to be careful of that you're not going to actually cross like a supernatural line.
Yeah, I think within the world of the space and the theater space, that beautiful holy space, as Peter
Hmm.
Brooks says, right? There's all the different ones, but I love the holy space where there is room for something
Hmm.
a little beyond. I think anything goes.
Right.
However, I've learned over the years of the processes of de-rolling and
Okay.
coming out of character work. We worked, with Carly on
Hmm.
when we did the Serpentine Pink film.
Right.
We really put that in there. We didn't have that when we did the play
Hmm.
10 years earlier, right? So I think as an artist, I've learned a lot about how to um, take off and maybe, put to bed that character after
Hmm.
each show. And also the prep to get into it is very important. So I have a lot of rituals in the dressing room with my altar, the different things I have on my altar, different ointments and tinctures and sprays. Water became a very important part of my ritual of coming out of that story. I was told by a tarot card reader years ago that as a Pisces, anytime I'm feeling negative energy, I need to find some way to cleanse with water, even if it's just washing my hands.
Hmm.
But it got to the point where once we were doing it at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I was covered in blood at the end of that play. Like we
Yeah.
went straight up, like there was a lot of blood. And the
Hmm.
only thing I could do was go into the shower. And
Right.
it turned into this. I got really nice shampoos,
Hmm.
a really beautiful bath, wash that just smelled great and just helped literally bring me back to my senses.
Hmm.
after having to perform that act over and over and over again. So I didn't have that going into the process. When I was first doing Bruja, I had my little things, my sage, my this, my that. But I've built up over the past decade or so different little wellness techniques that I also have started bringing into my curriculum with my students.
Oh,
Just
awesome.
a lot of the stuff we read, a lot of the stuff that makes really good theater is very triggering and conjures up a lot. And so we need to learn how we can dive all the way in, but then also safely bring ourselves out.
That's so important.
Yeah.
That's so important. I love the idea of how you used a ritual to kind of combat, like not combat, but balance out maybe the darker elements of
Mm-hmm.
the other ritual. So it's like ritual upon ritual balancing things
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love how important that is to you as an artist. It's made me I've actually what was it? The new moon in Virgo last September,
Yes.
which was like a few days before my birthday, was really intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I made an altar and I don't normally do that. And I was like, I'm gonna do Sabina. I'm gonna do Sabina's altar because I love how you appreciate and revere the presence and utilization of altars.
Mm.
And it was so helpful. I had it up for a few days and yeah, I need to
Oh,
create a
good.
permanent one, but yeah,
Altars are great.
altars. They
They're
are.
fun. You can change them. You can keep them for, I don't know. I think they're kind of a living, breathing thing,
Yeah,
depending on what you need.
for sure. So then did your duende, oh, this is the last question I'll ask about that, and then we can move on to the next part of the
Ooh.
conversation. But
Ah.
did your duende alter, like, how did your duende alter with the different variations of Luis's play? Like, did it
Mm.
change at all? Or because the public theater one, which was the last one, right, that you did,
Yes. Uh-huh.
that one was so different. I remember I
Yeah.
was embarrassingly sobbing in the front row for like at the public theater. My friend Katie was like rubbing my back because it was a very different duende. It was very much
Yes.
like catharsis, but connection in its deep sadness, whereas the other one was like a darkness. But how
Well,
was that for you to like, did your duende transform with each different variation of the play that you did?
absolutely. Because
Mhm.
Luis, just being such an aware artist, he's continuously, there's so many lines. We just went to go see a production at Cal State LA. And it was the first time I ever saw the piece. I've never seen it. And I was looking back and thinking of all the different lines that were put in there by different actors in different
Wow.
variations, where
Hmm.
Luis would be like, that's great. Let's put this. There's one by Nancy Rodriguez. There's one from like the little kid JJ, who's now like a freaking man. He was my son, and stuff that Zila added and Justin and everybody. So every iteration was a completely new play.
Hmm.
No matter how many times I had to do it, I had to, as I like to say, dust out the old cobwebs and have a fresh slate, because there would be tiny little changes that would affect everything, like butterfly
Hmm.
effect. The thing with the one in New York, when Che Yu and Luis were really kind of getting down and dirty about how to transport this story to New York, Luis really had this urge to activate Medea.
Hmm.
He wanted her to be just a little more front footed. And that's when he ended up giving her the monologue about
Mm,
the crossing. So it
right.
shifted from the nurse chorus character of Pita to Medea actually
Oh,
speaking the entire crossing journey, which was broken into two parts,
right.
because it had to be longer, because they had to make it not only from Mexico to like LA or whatever, they had to get all the way across to New York.
Right.
So there's a lot of extra steps of meeting the scary people at the Greyhound bus station, showing
Hmm.
up at, this big city that's just so loud. And
Hmm.
it shifted to just, it really deepened the survival instinct of the character and the
Hmm.
primalness that she was functioning off of. And I think when we get to our most primal, we're very connected to the duende.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it did shift. And that final moment, the way Che directed the piece, a lot of the moments of terror and abuse and darkness happened on that stage left side, which is
Mm,
where my final moment was for the final call
right.
of the bird. And for me,
Hmm.
even just having that spatial touchstone of knowing what it means to be in this corner, means to be in this darkness, and
Hmm.
having to break through it with that, her ascension at the end. It
Wow.
was so great. I loved the bookends of the
Hmm.
journey, having been totally, completely different,
Yeah.
with Bruja at the beginning, then the different iterations in between, and then a completely different one in New York at the end. It was just a beautiful progression of my
Yeah.
work with that piece. Yeah.
And I think I saw three iterations, but
I think so. You said Bruja, the one at the Getty, and
so
then New York?
Bruja and then the Getty and the New York. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfect little sampling.
Yeah. Wild.
Yeah.
Such an epic journey we all get to take.
I
Um,
know.
well, that was, I mean, there's so many other Duende performances that you've given,
In
and especially in our movies, Surface
the
Fine
movie.
Pink.
Woohoo! It just won a feature film at the LGBTQ plus Toronto Los Angeles Film Festival.
Yes. Thank you to Kristen for
Woohoo!
applying to all that stuff.
Yeah,
And
Kristen.
yeah, I love that we captured your Duende on film. I love it.
Everybody's
Everybody's
Duende.
Duende. Yes.
Everybody's full of
Everybody's
Duende in that
Duende.
show, man. Even the
Yeah.
Kimberly.
We need to do like a whole Duende discussions with the cast and just like
Yes,
do like the Duende of Serpentine Pink.
I love it.
But okay, great. So love that talk about the Sabina special edition of Duende, your own self-conjured Duende. Before we get into our specific example, our
Mhm.
holiday themed example of
Our
Duende,
seasonal, our seasonal.
seasonal, um, just like our Halloween episode with Allie, is there anything happening now that you feel like has Duende that you've seen recently or just in the art around you or
Yeah, I think so. In the past 4 years, I've had the pleasure of being invited to be a movement teacher for USC for both the MFA and the BFA program. So I've reconjured up a lot of the stuff that I was taught when I was in the program, and I've also just explored new and different things. And because of that, my attention has really gone to movement pieces, specifically dance, that don't have language. My
Mhm.
students don't speak a lot in my class. It's really all communication through the body. I have been obsessed with Matthew Bourne.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, I've seen I think four of
Choreographer?
his pieces now. Yes, Black Swan, The Red Shoes, Cinderella, most recently Romeo and Juliet. Oh my goodness. Talk about Duende. It's just the company of actors he gets for his pieces, the dynamic of the movement, the music that he uses for each of them. They're just delightful. Um, Finally got to see Rite of Spring by our girl
Pina,
Pina
Pina Bausch.
Bausch, and it was beautiful. I had only seen it in a recording, and this is a very, I don't, not to say it's a small thing, but it's a detail that caught my eye. Is in the recording, it's mainly dancers with all the same colored flesh, right? All
Mm, hmm.
very of the lighter complexion.
Hmm.
Whereas the one that I got to see recently, they were dancers from Africa. And the color of the skin against the costumes and the dirt,
Yeah.
there was just something oh, beautifully deep about it. So I really fell in love with that. And then most recently, our MFA students produced, I'm not going to remember the full name, but it's known as the Marat Sod.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And it had BAs, BFAs, and MFAs. It was
Wow.
directed by Steph Schroyer and Natsuko Ohama. And
Wow.
it was off the rails, full of fucking duende. These BAs and BFAs who created, the lunatics in the asylum were so dedicated to their characters
Hmm.
that even when the curtain went down, everybody had applauded, the actors had left, a few of them were still milling about the space,
Ooh.
just kind of like with these dead eyes and drool coming down. And I went up to one of them who was she's a current student right now. And I just gently stroked her underneath the chin to just kind of and I had my hand was just full of her slobber. I was
Oh,
like, yes, this is fucking awesome. Like they were just
visceral
visceral
saliva.
from beginning to end. They were engaged and completely supporting the work of it was mainly the MFAs who did,
Mhm.
the speaking roles, but these undergrads just went there. And I think the combination of Steph Schroyer's use of space
Yeah,
And
she's a master at that,
she's
right?
a freaking master. And then Natsuko really bringing out the personalization and the vocal
Mhm.
work. It just created a piece of theater that I felt harkened back to some of just like real early. Like I just think Peter Brook would be happy. I feel like it just lit me on fire to see
I
that
love
kind of work
that.
being done here. It was duende full.
I've never heard of that, the immersive aspect lasting after the show ends, because usually it's like the ritual kind of ends.
No,
Even
they
in
were just
immersive productions,
wandering around. And it's just
Mhm.
like, are they okay? What do we?
Yeah,
And it was great because you just still kind of like, oh my God, we're all still in here. They're letting us out, but they're not leaving. What's going on? It was great.
that's a tricky one, that play,
Yeah, it's a hard
because it's,
one.
yeah, because there are so many boundaries to cross.
Yeah.
But I love that. Maybe the
Mm,
experiment of doing a college production, being in school, is a kind of duende in and of itself, because
that's a good, yeah, good ponderance for
it
sure.
allows you to go to places you wouldn't feel like if you were thinking about pleasing an investor or
Mm,
pleasing a certain audience, or schools can be
hmm.
great incubators in that way. So I love that they
Yeah.
did that. They capitalized on that.
Yeah, it was great.
All right. Okay,
Mhm.
so part of the reason I wanted, of course, wanted you on this was just your general Sabina Duendeness, but also for, I love this idea. I'm trying to incorporate the podcast with the time of the year. Like
Yeah.
the way that the environment and timing of the seasons infiltrates its way into the digital space of
Hmm.
this format. And I really started that with Allie with
The
Halloween episode, and
Halloween. It
even
was
with Chris
great.
Peak, as we had our Duende drinks and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I I wanted to have you on for December and just the holiday season, because number one, the scent that or the sense that I associate so much with the holiday season is scent, which I
Mm,
associate with you so much because of your essential oils and just
hmm.
your general sensorial attunement. But also that you love, which I found out only recently, was it last year,
Mm,
that
it might have been.
you love A Christmas Carol. You're a
I'm
huge fan of
obsessed.
A Christmas Carol, and I never knew
Yes.
that. I would have never expect. I don't know why, because you surprise me constantly. But so I thought we could talk about the Duende of A Christmas Carol, Dickens' very
Absolutely.
famous Christmas novella
Yes.
about finding goodness and contentment and
Hmm.
joy in charity.
I love
So,
it.
can you talk a little bit about why you love A Christmas Carol, and then also what kind of duende is in A Christmas Carol, if there
Oh,
isn't any?
there is so much. At the
Oh
time when
wait,
Char, oh, yes. What do you got?
you put your scarf on. I'm gonna put
Oh,
my
you get
Christmas
your
scarf
scarf on.
on.
Yes.
And put my
Perfect.
Christmas scarf on.
It's beautiful. Looks like a
My
candy cane.
Victorian getting in the holiday.
You look like a
Victorian.
Dickens character.
Hello, I'm a Dickens character. My name's Margaret.
Margaret.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
love it. So, for me, the most exciting thing about Christmas Carol is the origin story of why Dickens wrote it.
Hmm.
And it's very much connected to his childhood. And at the time that he wrote it, he was pretty close to bankrupt.
Hmm.
And after still having all this amazing success and people knew him, he was wandering the streets of London and just dismayed. And I think many of us, especially this time of year in the cold, and many of us that live in more metropolitan cities have seen over the past 4 years or even longer the amount of unhoused folks on the streets, the tent cities that have been rising and moving and migrating. Oops, I just hit the microphone. This is what he was observing in his late night walks around London. And at this time, Christmas wasn't really celebrated. It
Right.
wasn't like the huge holiday, right?
Hmm.
And he was most concerned about the child labor that
Right.
was going on.
Because he was
And
a child laborer as well, right?
he had to quit school and work for an inking factory. He was putting labels on shoe polish because his father had to go to a debtor's prison, and his father owed like £40 and 10 shillings, which like today would be like $50.
Hmm.
These debtor prisons were notorious. It's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. It was the basis of one of his novels, a young girl whose father goes to a debtor's prison. So when I got offered a role at Dallas Theater Center,
Right. You were in a production of it.
I
Yeah.
was in a production. It's still to this day one of my favorite plays I've ever done. Dallas Theater Center does one of the coolest Christmas carols every year. There's a different Scrooge every year. Um, it's
Oh,
an
that's different. Usually
yeah.
like theaters have like their own Scrooge for like
Nope.
decades.
Every year it's different. So it's always exciting to see like who it's going to be.
Oh,
They've had a
oh,
female Scrooge. They've had like, it's fantastic. And the adaptation is by Kevin Moriarty, the artistic director.
oh, cool.
And he really leaned into the dark and dirty times. Like we
Ooh.
had dead kids all over the factory floors getting thrown down chutes off of the stage. They were smeared in black. Like it was just really gritty.
Hmm.
But then at the same time, we also had a bunch of live music. I had to sing. There was carols. It was just, there was snow. People were flying. It was off the charts.
People were
But
flying? What do you
yeah, we
mean?
had, yeah, the ghost of the second ghost, the
Oh,
ghost of
oh, okay.
Christmas Present, was played by two young actresses who would switch every night, but they
Oh,
would do
okay.
acrobatics in the air
Wow.
on wires and just bounce around everywhere.
That's
Marley
amazing.
came shooting out of the stage on these chains hanging from these. I mean, it was a scale of a play um, I've never been involved in or since. It was just amazing, and I was asked to give the pre-show lecture every day.
Oh,
So at that time, we were doing 8, 9, 10 shows a week because it was Christmas times.
whoa.
So
Yeah.
we were getting overtime. We were doing this.
Yeah.
So I would do a little 45-minute lecture, and I just got really into it. And I also wrote a blog on my experience in sort of in the style, in the framework of A Christmas Carol, which is written in 5 staves.
Hmm.
So the staves are the musical lines on a sheet of paper,
Oh.
and it's Charles' little tip of the hat to the carol. This is a Christmas carol, so it's a musical. So we have the introduction with stave 1, stave 2, 3, and 4 are the ghosts, and stave 5 is the resolution at the end. And he wrote it to be read out loud. So this is, and that's how it circulated. It sold out. It was just like it became a phenomenon. Christmas. It's not that they started celebrating Christmas because of it, but
Hmm.
it really was like a fire that started it. And if you ever read it out loud, it is so much fun. One of my dreams is to do like a performance where the whole book is read out loud. Just he
Oh,
says
I'd
little
love that.
things of like, it was as close to you as I am to you now, right at the spirit of your elbow.
Mm.
He has these little lines where this narrator is just, I feel like the narrator is filled
Who
with
is the
this.
narrator? Do you know? Nobody knows. Maybe it's the spirit of Christmas.
You know what I mean? It's that beautiful thing of like, it's such a heavy narrative, but we don't ever need to know who it is. It's just this beautiful, observant eye into this
Mm.
opportunity, and just the way it's written. There's a lot of text that talks about darkness
Hmm.
when it explains the images and the way that the ghosts, because what's great, and you got to see two of my favorite renditions,
Hmm.
what's great is there's like 100 different film versions of it, how each production decides to portray the different ghosts, because some
Right.
are pretty clearly written out and some aren't. And when I played the Ghost of Christmas Past in the adaptation, I was actually Ebenezer Scrooge's mother.
Oh,
So when I was showing him
interesting.
stuff with his sister Fan and stuff with, his job and all of these kind of things, I was doing it from a motherly place. And the actor who played uh, Scrooge, Chambly Ferguson, had just lost his mother that summer.
Hmm.
So when we were doing this production, there was just this very sacredness
Yeah.
to the fact that the Ghost of Christmas Past was the mother, and our scenes were just so beautiful, and it was just such a different way of approaching. I would never have thought of approaching that Ghost of Christmas Past as that
Making it
representation.
more personal always has
uh
more duende,
right,
has more
yes, recipe,
immediacy. Yeah,
yeah.
I love that idea of when you speak it out into the world.
Mm.
Um, it changes, it alters it, and that's why I last night I was listening to it on my Audible app, and I was
Awesome.
trying to choose between, it was a terrible decision, but I was trying to
Oh.
choose between Hugh Grant or Tim Curry, two very different Christmas carols.
Very different.
I ended up going with Hugh Grant because he seems more Scroogey to
Uh-huh.
me
I
than
don't
Tim
know.
Curry.
Tim Curry's pretty.
Really?
I
He
mean, I don't
always
know
seems
about.
so cool and I
He's
don't
just
know.
so. I would say, Duende, no Duende.
Yeah,
Hugh Grant or Tim
yeah,
Curry.
yeah.
Flipping it on you. Yeah, I don't know. Tim Curry just. We used to party at Tim Curry's house in grad school.
What? Oh, right, because
Total tangent.
he
Our
knew
professor
later
used to live in
professors.
his house in Hollywood. Yeah. Anyway,
So
so
okay, so
how was
what?
the
So then
reading?
what is the Duende of Christmas Carol then?
I think it's the internal journey of somebody facing your past, present, future.
Oh, it has that.
It has to
What
do
you were
with that
talking about
time
before.
thing. That's what I
Yeah.
was thinking of. And it's just also being in a space in which our body, his physical body, Scrooge's body is flying. He's worried,
Mhm.
I'm a mortal man, I shall fall. Take but one touch of my what is it, robe, and you shall. And he's doing all these like things that are physically impossible, right? And it's freaking him out a little bit. So he's getting pushed to that edge. And especially towards the
The edge of the
end.
pit, like Lorca
Oh my
says.
God. And so I want to read this final in
Ooh,
stave
reading.
4. It's the introduction of the third and final ghost, which is the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery.
Wow.
And I love it because that final ghost for me
Gloom
is the
mystery.
most Duende because it's the unknown of the future and what could possibly come. And there's one part where it says you wouldn't even know the ghost was there except for that one hand peeking
Hmm.
out because it's such a part of the fabric of the darkness of the
Hmm.
future that could be. And that's where we get to see the poor children under the robe and just like the families starving and just like ugh. Um, so for me, it's oh God, the visual acrobatics of the language of Dickens in this short novel is just ripe for performers to speak, but also just reading it to hear it. I recommend most people read it if you haven't in a
Hmm.
while. If you've seen it, it's great, but it doesn't hold as much of the language. The Muppets Christmas Carol has a lot of Dickens language in it, surprisingly,
Yeah.
more than
Very
most.
accurate.
Is very accurate, but it's not a long read. It's
Yeah,
a
it's a
very,
novella, right?
it's
He
a
wrote it in
small
like
little
6 weeks or
novella.
something
He
to
wrote it
save
in
himself
six
from
weeks.
debt.
Yeah.
This is what my background is. Dan
Yes.
Stevens. Have you watched this yet?
I have not watched that
Your
one yet.
assignment is to watch this, and
Done.
then you need to give me a review and I'll post it.
I
But
accept.
it's Dan Stevens, the British actor, great British actor. He plays, from a movie called The Man Who Invented Christmas, and he plays
Yes.
Dickens. It's set in Victorian London, but it's all filmed in Dublin. And and because they have those old neighborhoods that look like
Totally.
Victorian times. And it's wonderful. I love it so much because it's about a writer and the creative process of a writer. And he
Yes.
does what I thought I was crazy for doing, where he acts out. You have scenes where he acts out his scenes.
Love
So
it.
Dan Stevens as Dickens is portraying the characters in A Christmas Carol, like he's interacting with Scrooge. Christopher Plummer plays Scrooge.
Oh,
It's one of his last roles, I think, before he passed away.
wow.
So he plays Scrooge, and then he there, but it's really spooky too. It's like it
Mm.
was from a few years ago, I think. And
Yeah.
so it has this like edge of being like him confronting his own duende.
Mm.
Dickens, you see Dickens confronting his duende because he has a time crunch. He has
Yeah.
to get this done. He has to save his family from debt. He has his wife is pregnant. They have another kid on the way. His dad is in debt. He has all these things, and he writes this incredible book about, charity and about
Yeah.
being, the spirit of Christmas being a consideration of your neighbor. And I love that. And I didn't know until I was listening to another podcast about, it was a BBC podcast about a short history of Dickens. And
Hmm.
I didn't know that Dickens started out wanting to be an actor.
I didn't
And
know
that,
that either.
yeah, he wanted to be an actor. And so it makes sense that in this movie, that
Yeah.
Dan Stevens would act out. And the great thing that the meta thing about the movie that I love is that Dan Stevens is like huge narrator, audible
Mm.
narrator of books. And so he's an avid reader. And so it was just like this added layer of him being able to portray a writer as being somebody who reads and getting all the
Yes.
different characters and voices.
Yes.
And it was just all these different wonderful layers of character and performance and so much conjuring of duende, so much conjuring of spirit, the essence of what Christmas means, of what it means to be a creative person in dark times, the
Yeah.
ghostly aspect, the idea
Hmm.
of being when you're an artist and a writer, specifically when you're conjuring a story, it's like you're an alchemist, like you're
Yes.
alchemizing like something from nothing, right? Something
Yeah.
from the ether. You're
Hmm.
you're you're concocting and cooking up a story,
Yeah.
a different life. So it's very godlike in a way.
It
And so
is.
I just love that movie that it portrays that and it just captures Dickens' wildness and his weirdness. And so I I I really like how you love it. I love how you love it. And that if you are a Dickens fan, I highly recommend watching that. It's
Yeah,
cool.
my mom told me to watch it last year,
Oh
and
yeah?
I had it on the list, and for some reason I just never sat down to do it. So now it's like feels even more
Hmm.
this is the time I think that I'm supposed to watch it now that we
Yeah.
brought this into this conversation.
And there's so many. When I was looking for podcasts to listen to prep for this, there was a podcast about this British scholar goes through, he reviews and he breaks down and reviews every single Christmas Carol movie.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I got to send
Oh
this to
my
Sabina.
gosh. Well, and I
Uh,
found there's a picture of the original script of his original manuscript.
wow.
And I was learning that he didn't make a lot of money off of it, even though it was selling out, selling out, selling out. He was
Hmm.
very particular about the way he wanted it bound. And he
Mm.
wanted it to be bound in a certain way that it was used for reading. But the materials and the paper and everything were so expensive that he was just like bleeding money. But he just really
Yeah.
wanted it to be in that way. But looking at the pages of the original manuscript, seeing all the little edits, and I find it so fascinating.
Yeah.
You writers just blow my mind with the ability to hold full stories in your head with all the characters talking to each other, and love hearing that you had that connection of the when you because I know you always talk to me about how you're speaking out loud in your characters and
Yeah.
going through the process.
Yeah. Somebody was, if Big Brother was looking in and caught video, I'd look like a crazy person
We
doing
are
it.
crazy people.
Yeah.
Takes a
But
bit of
I
crazy.
but that's just so wonderful. The connection between Christmas Carol, the ghosts of past, present, and future, and then your interpretation of Duende as being a like a simultaneity of times and how,
Well, and I think it's also something to be said. It's a social justice piece
right, that's
that
true.
Dickens did,
Yeah.
right? So I think it
Hmm.
was something again going back to like there's just some sort of calling that he's feeling of like something's not right. The kids aren't
Hmm.
all right,
Hmm.
and we got to do something about it. And just yeah, that push, that just belief that to be able to churn that out
Hmm.
in 6 weeks, and it's just and
Sometimes
it's
that's how it
just
happens,
and it's just living on, it's beautiful.
and how he changed. That's what the movie talks about too, is that he changed, he invented the idea of modern Christmas, that Christmas
Right.
is a place, is a time to be charitable.
Hmm.
Because before, like you said before, it wasn't a huge holiday. Now it's
Yeah.
this spirit thing. And I didn't know that Victorians were obsessed with ghost stories because there was so much death around them
Makes total sense.
that they were like, what happens after we die? Like
Mm.
like let's see if there's life after this and what happens. And there, I mean, I feel like Victorian era ghost stories are common, but I didn't know that's why, and that spiritualism came from America. I
Okay.
think like the modern idea of spiritualism, like seances and stuff, because of the Civil
Mm,
War, because so many people were dying from the Civil War.
much death.
And they were, yeah, so much death, the same thing. And then the Irish famine as well, and that
Which
people
wasn't
were,
really a famine. That was an
right, the
economical
famine,
genocide.
quote unquote, yeah, from Victoria. Oh,
Economical, that's not the right word.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, that idea, I love the way that he uses supernatural aspect to comment on this social justice issue, this workers' rights issue. And it reminded me a
mhm.
little bit of Ibsen in the play Ghosts,
Oh
and how,
yeah.
because Ibsen was so obsessed with, feminism and workers' rights and all that kind of stuff. And he used ghosts in Ghost as well, the idea
Yeah.
of haunting, like what haunts you and
Yeah.
repeated patterns, and how do you break repeated patterns to get rid of, to kind of work your way towards dealing with trauma, or getting rid of trauma, or getting rid of quote unquote sins of the past. And they
Mm,
kind of reminded me of
it's a
each other in those
reckoning.
ways. And those both during Victorian era.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
Ibsen
true.
was in Norway, but yeah,
But still, yeah.
yeah, they're
Well,
so
you know
fascinating.
how I can link death to our love of scents?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I asked
So,
Sabina, okay, good
yeah, good.
transition. So I asked
Yes.
Sabina, so like I've been trying to make this podcast for more visceral and more
Mm,
sensorial, sensual. And with Chris Peak, I did drinks, which we can
mhm.
always have a duende drink whenever. And then with Allie, I did Halloween candy. And so with
Yeah.
Sabina, because Sabina, I love, you can always you could always smell Sabina coming in, because she is just this goddess of essential oils and these wonderful, wonderful perfumes. And so I think of the holidays, I think of there's so many good,
Yeah.
comforting, zesty, spicy aromas during the holiday season. So I thought that would be a good duende object visceralness
Perfect.
to
It's
bring in, is
perfect.
like a scent. So I have mine, but what is your
Yes.
duende holiday scent?
So the Duende Holiday Scent was introduced to me by our dear collaborator, Kristen Condon. Her mother, Claire, uh, gifted us a little bottle of thieves oil
Mm.
by Living, I think it's Living Essentials. I can't remember the brand. It was when we were doing Serpentine Pink. It was in the colder months because the Creation Festival is like January, February.
Hmm.
And this oil has a history related to the plague.
Whoa.
So there were French spice traders that traded in clove and cinnamon. This is when spices were really starting to go, all the way to Indonesia and Turkey and all over the place, Europe. But then the plague happened and a lot of spice trade got shut down
Mm.
because of all the death that was going on. A few of these spice traders turned to thievery and they mixed a concoction of oils to slather themselves in, break into homes of people who had just died, and rob them of their goods, but not get sick themselves.
Oh my
And
God.
so this is a recipe that I learned. I found it online after that. Kristen gifted me that little bottle after we closed Serpentine Pink, and it just became my favorite, like theater shield for the plague that can happen when
Wow.
you're working in,
Wait, so
like
what
when I
is it
was.
made of?
So it's made of clove, cinnamon, lemon, eucalyptus, and rosemary.
Eucalyptus.
Yes, and there's different drops of each. There's a whole recipe that you can make it yourself. And for Christmas last year, I did a witch hazel and thieves oil spray for my family members. So you could just spray it because it needs to have a carrier,
Mm-hmm.
right, into some sort of oil or a diffuser or something. Because
Mm-hmm.
cinnamon and clove are
Yeah.
very, very abrasive. They can
Intense.
burn.
Yeah.
But when I was working on Christmas Carol, we had like 18 kids in that show. And this is dead of winter in Dallas, and people were dropping like flies,
Oh
stomach
no.
bug,
This is way
flu.
before COVID too.
This is way before COVID. And I went to one of the local health food stores, bought bulk oils, found a bunch of little jars, and just made a shit ton of thieves oil and just left it out in the green room. And I was like, just take a little vial, put it under your nose, put it in your ears, put it on your feet. And it's just my go-to, especially in the colder times. It's also really nice to just put in a pot of boiling water
Mm.
and just let the kind of
Inhale
aroma, yeah, it could fill your room.
the spirit, the
The
ether. It's like another,
spirit.
it's a ghost of the scent
Yes. And just, I love the
infiltrating the
history of it.
atmosphere. Yeah.
Oh, and the thieves were caught and they were gonna go to jail, but they were also curious, like, how did you not get sick robbing all these people that had the plague? And they're like, well, we use this oil thing. And they're like, all right, give us the recipe and you can go. So
Oh,
they
wow.
bartered. And so then the thieves' oil became kind of a well-known, um, yeah, a well-known mixture, a tincture to help ward off. It's antibacterial, antiviral. It's powerful.
I never knew that. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that in. I love that it has this kind of nefarious origin,
Yeah.
but that it's also protective, that dual
Mm-hmm.
nature of duende. Oh my God, I thought you
Mm-hmm.
were going to drink it. That's your Snapple or your tea or something. It's like
It's my
Sabina's
yeah.
going way too far. She's drinking her duende aroma. That is awesome. I want to try it sometime.
I know. If only we could like, if only I could just go like, you could smell it. I just sprayed
I
it
can
into
smell
the
it. Do
microphone.
you know what's weird? I can smell it.
Love it.
Do I have synesthesia? I don't know.
I think maybe.
But I noticed this thing. I don't know what it's called, but I have this app with white noise sounds. And one of the white noise options is Poe's library, like Edgar Allan Poe's library. And it's
Ooh.
just like a little fire crackling
Yeah.
with like, I think there's some people like
Turning pages
turning
or something.
pages and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And it's so relaxing. It puts me to sleep so fast.
Oh,
But I feel warm when I listen to it.
yeah.
But there's
I
no
love
warmth
it.
coming from it, but I feel
I do the same.
warm.
I put on YouTube, I put on the fireplace. Like I put on the fireplace and I'll do work and I'll just hear the crackling fire. And it's just something about hearing a crackling fire.
Yeah.
I think because we are imaginative people
Hmm.
and we're able to go to places like that, because that's
Yeah.
just how we're primed.
The
It
mind
makes
is
total
wild.
sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's so cool. Okay.
Tell me about
So
yours.
mine is, let me
Pine
get it. Pine cone. Oof.
cone. Ooh.
It's a scented pine cone. It's from my mom's Christmas decor.
Mm,
And I brought it in as my duende scent because it so reminds me of the holidays.
mm.
But it also, because it just puts me in that place of my mom's Christmas decor because it's fake, like it's like a fake scent of cinnamon and like general Christmas spice,
Yeah, yeah,
but it also smells like the wilderness.
yeah.
So it has this dual phony authenticity to it, which is which I think really
The
captures
woodsiness.
duende
Yeah.
because duende the duende of it is that it has this authentic feel, but it's also playful in that it's like, just kidding, I'm not real.
Mm.
But also because my mom has always said that her aesthetic, her interior, she should be an interior designer, like the way what
Hmm.
she does with her house.
She's an incredible artist.
Yeah, she tries, especially during Christmas time, she wants to bring the woods inside. So
Yes.
you feel like you're in the wilderness, the forests of our Scandinavian ancestors,
Love
being
it.
Irish. Yeah. And it's just you feel like you're in the woods, in the wilderness,
Mm.
but it's not, you're not really. So it's I love this that duality, that combination of we're going to bring the wildness into this domestic situation.
Hmm.
And to me, that's the best experience of Duende because like we're talking about with Ali last the Halloween episode, I love being wild and experiencing something spooky, but to a point. Like
Yeah.
feeling the safeness of it. So it's like we're not totally in the woods, but it
Hmm.
feels like we are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's theater.
Yeah. Oh my
You're
God,
bringing
yeah.
something from the outside into a space
Yeah.
and you're creating it to the best of your ability and as far as you want to go, and you do what you can to ask the audience to go there with you.
Hmm.
You know, you hear of theater companies that are doing smells. I went to see Curse of the Starving Class with David
Mm.
Warshawski was in it at the Signature back in 2019. And you walk in and you just you smell bacon and eggs cooking. in the
Mm.
kitchen, in the kitchen, and the food is so big in that play. And
Hmm.
it's just like, I love that. And when productions decide, like we handed out our lollipops for Serpentine Pink on each of the
Right.
seats. Remember, we wanted people to like,
Henrietta's oral fixation.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I love that idea of bringing the outside in. And
Hmm.
I can imagine how nostalgic it is for you every time this year to just have that. Oh, here come the smells. There's the pine cones. It's
Hmm.
just, I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And it's this conflict between, oh, okay, so duende or no duende,
Mm.
real Christmas trees, fake Christmas trees.
Ooh, it depends on how you decorate it.
Oh wait, this or that duende, I guess. Yeah. I'm mixing up all the games. I'm
It's okay.
drunk on cinnamon spice
And now I can smell your pine
scent.
cone because
Yeah.
I sprayed this
Yeah.
and it works perfectly. I think it depends. So in our family, we would notoriously get our Christmas tree on Christmas Eve,
Mm.
and we would do it so we could bargain. Because we're like, well, what are you
Oh.
going to do with these Christmas trees? It's
Yeah.
tomorrow's Christmas. So here's $20. Oh, maybe 40. Like I'd hide a 20 in my pocket. My mom would have a 20 in hers. So we'd be like, mm. We bargained to get a bunch of extra branches so she could put it around her nativity scene
Hmm.
and around the house and stuff. So we always had a fresh tree. But then in the past couple of years, schedules or something happened. We just weren't able to. It just got a little harder. And we borrowed my aunt's 7 foot, something you get from Lowe's. But because we had all the same ornaments on it that we're so attached to, I didn't really feel that much grief for it not being a real tree. And
Hmm.
it almost gave us permission to just go a little easy on ourselves during a holiday
Yeah.
that can get really tough. Like
Yeah.
I can see the benefit of artificial, and I don't know. I think it just depends on how you decorate it and welcome it in your house, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys have, I mean, where you guys are in New Mexico, it's the wind, the wind, that desert winter wind.
Oh, with the smell of cedar
The
and
smell of
pinon.
it. Yeah.
Oh my
You
gosh.
get that just by opening the window. So,
Yeah, that's very true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. What did I have the next one? Oh, traditional Christmas colors or this trend, which I love, of pink pastel Christmas colors.
I mean, you know me, I love all colors. So I'm
Hmm.
not very good at this game because I'm like, both are amazing. I have to say, I'm not traditionally, I don't like the green and white
Hmm.
and red. I love like white and gold and silver
Hmm.
and like more kind of like snow and like a
Yeah, wintry wonderland.
wintry wonderland and like a weird dark blue of the sky and the orange of a fire. So I'm leaning towards non-traditional.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like both. But I do like the pink pastels as well. It's a very
Yeah.
divisive topic in our family. But yeah, okay. The next one, it's not holiday themed, but it's sort of holiday themed because
Hmm.
we're going to see it during the holiday season.
Mm.
Do you say, or which one has more duende? Gado or Gado?
Gado.
Gado. Okay.
I like Gado.
Hmm. We're going to see
I
Waiting
don't,
for Gado on
on
Thursday at
Thursday.
the Geffen.
So excited. I think, oh my God, talk about Duende. We could go down a whole rabbit hole
Yeah.
of that. And the tree, there's a tree, so it is holiday.
Mm.
But no, Gado. I don't know when you were in when you were at the Beckett Festival in Ireland.
Hmm.
What did you hear?
Gado.
Gado. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've always said Gado. I mean, before I really got into it, of course said Godot. And sometimes I just say Godot because people think you're an asshole if you say Gado. Like, it was like, oh, you think
It's
you're
the code
like,
switching. It's a little code switching.
yeah. And I also like the emphasis on God because
Yeah.
it's like that's what the play's about, sort of. And
Yeah.
like,
Uh-huh.
okay, last one.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
Irish whiskey or Scotch whiskey?
Irish whiskey all the way.
Okay. I've actually never had Scotch whiskey, I don't think. And
It's
there's
just,
some
well,
blurry lines about where whiskey actually originated. Some think it's Ireland, some think it's Scotland, but
right. Well,
I never,
and then there's, yeah, because there's the whole like whiskey can be made anywhere, bourbon has to be made here, Scotch has to be made
Hmm.
in Scotland, kind of thing, right? And I just this for me, Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey is like a comparison between like mezcal and tequila,
Hmm.
where for me, Scotch and mezcal have that real smoky, peaty, earthy, which you would think,
Hmm.
being who I am, that that's kind of what I gear towards. But weirdly, I don't like the fuminess that comes out of the. It's I think it's so duende that's too much for me to just
Hmm.
like enjoy as a spirit. Like it's so much. It holds so much in it, and it's. But I just love a good little shot of Tullamore Dew, and
Hmm.
I'll even have some Jameson.
Yeah.
But and then you got me that beautiful. Well, that was the
Bushmills.
Bushmills, the Peaky Blinders edition.
But the best whiskey
Yes.
I ever had
Mm-hmm.
was at that Irish restaurant we went to after we saw Mojada at the Public.
Oh, we went to Swift,
Swift.
right
Is
around
that
the
based on
corner from the
Jonathan Swift?
public.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Oh
the
my
whole
God.
thing is dedicated to the poet Jonathan Swift.
Oh my God. It was so crowded in there. I don't remember
Yes,
what, but
yes,
I want to go back there. But it it was a whiskey from Cork. It was
yes.
so good and smooth and smoky and best I don't remember what it was called. And
We
then
just have to go back there.
I went to Dublin like a few days after that
That's
for the
right.
Beckett Summer School.
That's right. It's on the list. We got to do our Irish trip.
Yes. Well, Sabina, thank you so much for doing this. We've gone, I think, over an hour, but that's fine.
Love it. I'm not
Um,
surprised.
yeah, I know, right? It's like hard to keep to rein in our
I know
Duende
there's so
combos.
much,
I
so
was
much
gonna
comes
ask you,
out.
maybe we'll do it as a bonus, but I was gonna ask you, we've had so many Duende shenanigans. Like,
Oh yeah.
is there anything, well, I'll ask you later, maybe. Maybe we'll do an addendum.
I
We've had
think
so
the
much
addendum would
interpersonal
be
Duende.
our musical adventures.
Yeah,
I think it really is based in music.
I was
A
gonna
lot
say
of
that.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's our Ian and our David and yeah.
And now Ghost.
And now Ghost.
Yeah,
So much. I love it.
you're my sister in rock.
Yes.
Love it. Um, yeah, anything else you want us to know about Duende? I think we
I
covered
think
a lot.
we did cover a lot. There's so much more. I wanted to dive more, and I'm inspired to do more research on this idea of the trickster and
Hmm.
the actual duende, which I
Hmm.
didn't know much about, these little goblin trickster
Yeah.
leprechauns, because in a lot of Pueblo and indigenous culture in New Mexico, that happens in certain festivals where these clowns will come out, or
Mm.
there's these things called sleepwalkers in Navajo
Whoa.
tradition that kind of take on people that you think and like they can be the more menacing type. But I've been curious in trying to create some sort of workshop or class based around the trickster, jokester, clown persona.
Ooh,
And
I
now I
love
want to
that.
add duende into it.
Oh my God, love it. Can I
So
audit
thank
it?
you. Yeah, you can help me make it, please.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, great.
For sure.
Done. All right.
Well,
For
thank you
Bitsooth
so much, dude.
University.
And we can find you on socials at Sabina Zúñiga Varela on
On the Instas,
Instagram.
yes. I have a
And
really cool, my website's down, but I have a cool blog I haven't written in for a while. But
love
to
your
see
blog.
the Christmas Carol, my 5 staves, it's on Stepping into Magic, an artist's journey.
That's your blog?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'll
Yay.
post a link when we post this. Thank you so much, dude.
This is so
I
fun.
I love you.
I love you too.
And I'll see you on Thursday at
See you
our
Thursday.
Gatto adventure.
Gado, gado, gado.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, dude.